We should be live. All right. Hello, everybody out there in the land of the internet. Welcome to our weekly interview series. Today, we have the tremendous pleasure of having the wonderful master musician and drummer, composer, producer, educator, world traveler, and a friend of mine for over 20 years now. It's hard to say, hard to believe that. This is the great Ollie Jackson. Ollie, thank you for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So for those of you that are new to this interview thing, we do this every single week and with different musicians. And so I'm going to interview Ali for about 45 minutes here. If you have any questions for Ali or myself, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll do our best to get to them the last 15 minutes of the interview here. So Ali, I first met you in the late 90s, and I had the good fortune of getting to play some music with you and learn a lot of lessons, life lessons from you and music lessons. You look almost exactly the same, like you haven't aged a day. Now I know that's not true. I mean, there's mileage, but you look exactly the same. And I've thought about this quite a bit, particularly with a lot of musicians. And it seems like a lot of musicians, despite their age, look a lot younger. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess it's the hustle to keep trying to find the next gig.
Yeah, sure.
Running after the gig wagon. I just think that the music keeps you young. And the older guys, they say that you're always being around younger people because they have a zest for life or figuring it out or earlier on their journey. So I like to think that I'm still trying to figure it out and I'm still early on my journey.
Yeah. Well, there's so many questions I'd like to ask you in so many directions that this can go, and the time's going to go fast. So, and I put a bunch of stuff about your bio in here, and people can check Wikipedia. Obviously, there's a ton of information. But can you talk a little bit about how you got started? I know you came from a musical family. Can you maybe talk about your family and how you had your beginnings with music?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. My father was the late legendary Ollie Jackson Sr., bassist and musician, composer. So I guess I fell off that. I fell close to the tree, I like to think. My uncle Oliver Jackson was a great drummer, band leader. He worked many years with George Wein, like through the inception of the Newport Jazz Festival, what people know, and has led many bands and recorded all over, played with people like Earl Father Hines for many years. And others, like all from that whole swing era generation. So he was quite prolific in that realm and in that world. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I went to the famed Cass Tech High School, where so many great musicians attended: Jerry Allen, Barry Harris, Paul Chambers, James Jamerson, and a host of others. I'm just scratching it. Carlos McKinney, my cousin, and so many others. Greg Fillinganes. So I was fortunate to be in that environment, and I was very fortunate to be mentored by people by the likes of Marcus Belgrave, Donald Walden, Ken Cox, Teddy Harris, Roy Brooks, Lawrence Williams. I mean, the people go on and on. And people closer to our generation, like Rodney Whitaker and Bob Hurst, were also like big brothers. It's a community. And the music is a community, and it's very communal. And it doesn't mean you always are the tightest or homies that you figure, like, this is my bud forever, my best bud forever. It's like, no, I mean, there's certain people that will be hard on you and your personalities might not mesh, but there's a respect and a mutual respect and admiration. So, yeah, it's what it is in competition. So I was fortunate to grow up in that time where excellence was a mandate. You had to be serious. You had to be on your instrument. You had to know your scales. You had to have a sound. You had to know tunes. This was like a requirement. It wasn't like, oh, I can do it if I want to.
Yeah.
Like, well, you won't do this. It's like, same with sports and athletics. That hasn't changed that much. But in music, it's changed significantly, where the bar is not at the top.
What I want to jump in here really quick, because I'm assuming, like I said, these go fast, and we're not going to touch scratch the surface of all the stuff I want to ask you. But for those of you who have been keeping up with Ali, or if you're not keeping up with Ali, he's been doing a lot of great videos on YouTube, and he's got some Instagram stuff, and he's got a lot of these programs and thoughts. And he put it the other day. I mean, it's just his opinions, but it's his opinions based on 30 plus years in the music industry, playing with some of the greatest music minds ever. So where can people find out stuff that you're doing now, these current projects, Ali?
Well, you can subscribe to my YouTube page. It's just Ali Jackson. And I have 3 series that are running, or 3 programs. One is called See You at the Gig, which is a video essay format that talks about things related to art, culture, politics, in general.
The Grammys.
Yeah, everything you might, music. If you're a music head and you want to get inside of the music, I talk about things that are relevant to that. Then there's another series that we're about to launch. We finished shooting the first season. It's called Bout It. So like, be about it. Don't talk about it. Be about it. So this is a short video format that features living legendary musicians that are often overlooked or underappreciated in the mainstream. So we caption that show, and I bring in different guests to talk about these great artists, which is kind of fun. And then the last thing is called On the Record with Ali, where I have reactions, musical related reactions to new releases or new recordings from artists. So that's always good. And it's never personal. I had to put a disclaimer because people think I'm like personally attacking them. It's like, no, it's just about the music. I mean, there's certain things that are good and certain things that are bad. And I just illuminate that because obviously critics have struggled doing that since the inception of critical review.
Yeah, totally. Wonderful. Well, I want to go back to your roots and your beginning. I was watching one of your videos the other day, and you mentioned your kind of the way you came to music is different than a lot of the way most people come to music. Or I should say, a lot of people that, like, for me, I started in band. I didn't come from a musical family. I mean, my parents listened to music, but I didn't have any musicians in my family to speak of. So I started in band, learning how to read and learning how to do all that regular kind of stuff. But you mentioned in your video that you started, like, you said something about a color wheel, that you were doing some ear training or something like that with your father. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah,
my father started a system for learning music. This is actually how I learned music, as being 2 years old, 3 years old. The color wheel is based around the cycle of fourths one way, cycle of fifths the other way. Each note corresponds to a color. Each note corresponds to a zodiac sign. And then there's different nomenclatures that he came up with as far as like the movement of 7 and 3, like learning harmony and how harmony moves and how harmony works. So, and it correlates to numbers, like 1, 3, 5, 7, 1, 3, 5 major 7, 1 flat 3, flat 5, 7, all of this. So it's all correlated to numbers, colors, astrological chart. And so like a whole 360, his number was always 360. So that was my foundation and introduction into the world of music or sound, sonics. And then he taught courses on, sound and physics. He did something with an astrophysicist who was a friend of his, and they taught at Oakland University in the 70s. And so he was always about the celestial in this world, because music is truly metaphysical. And when played well, it can communicate many things far beyond you just hearing a note. And it's like, oh, I like this song and I like the lyrics. If you can let it penetrate your spirit, it will bring you to another level of enlightenment. And I don't want to get too deep or philosophical, like I'm some kind of soothsayer and all of that. No, it's not. I'm not saying that. But when you hear music played extremely well, it does something to the spirit, because there's a lot of care and intention inside of the music. So I grew up in that environment. So I learned to play piano and learn harmony, 4 or 5 years old, playing chords at the piano. I could play all my chords, but I didn't know what they were.
Right.
So that's important for people to understand too. Like, there's always two sides to it. If you physically can do something, how it's explained to you is different. but you actually know it and it's in your head. It's like it becomes part of you. So that's an element of learning. Sometimes I feel in our society today, there's too much emphasis on like the cerebral part of it and not enough or emphasis on the feeling part of it.
Yeah.
Like, to be a great musician, it's like you must feel it. Doesn't matter if you could read, doesn't matter if you know what all of this, like feeling it is the most important thing. Like all of the other stuff helps you to how can I say, organize it in a different way, for lack of a better word. But feeling it is that's the thing. If you can feel it, then you got it.
Yeah. Well, I know you do a lot of, I mean, since I first met you, I mean, you know, like I said, it was the late 90s. You were teaching then and organizing sessions at your house. Whenever you were not on the road, you were organizing sessions at your house and getting out in the community and playing. And you made a big impact here in the Northwest during your tenure here. Do you, because when I watched your video, that was the first I'd heard of the color wheel. Do you ever teach or explain that type of information that your dad taught? Do you ever talk about that or explain that to people?
I'm open to it. I've never taught like a class on it because I've never been in a situation to actually teach a course on it, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. It's a system more for people like they have no connection to the music and to learn the music. And I mean, even for like cats that are like heavy, it's a way, it's a philosophy. I know the late great Dennis Irwin swore by it. When I met him many years later, he knew me as a little kid or like I was a baby. And we crossed paths some years later. And he just, man, he was so like reverent about that experience with my pops and the color wheel and what it did for him.
Yeah.
You know, and in the green room, all of the philosophies my father had about, music and being prepared to be a vessel of the music. So I think a lot of the elements of like the technical thing, like those are givens. Like I always say that to people, like you actually having proficiency on your instrument, having a great sound, having knowledge of theory and harmony, like that's all prerequisites though. You actually creating music has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask a little bit further. Well, one thing I should say too, because people talk about, well, you have to wait. You know, a lot of times people say, well, you have to wait till 5th grade to start band, or, I remember when I was grabbing some lessons with you while you were in town, and I was floored because I got to your house and there was a little toy drum set, and your 2-year-old son could get on the drum set and play time, like good time. And I was super impressed by that. So I'd like to know maybe your thoughts about when is the right time to start, immersing kids in music and working with them.
I mean, in the womb, they could be in the womb. And it's the quality of the music. I always say it's the spiritual content of what it is in the music. Pop music is cool. I'm not like anti-pop, or I'm not anti like other forms of music. I feel like all music has an intention, and that's why we create it. So I always start to go back. You keep going back and further back in time, or like in traditions, and it's like those things are more pure. And so when people say purity, it's like it's a negative thing. Like purity is the highest level of anything. So I would say music that carries a certain, uplifting vibration to it. And so if you can expose kids to that and things that aren't loud, sometimes power is in the things that are subtle. Power is not in somebody yelling at the top of their lungs. Like if I was doing that right now on your podcast, they'd be like, man, this guy is truly crazy. But in our culture and society, spectacle has been the thing. Like who can scream the loudest gets the attention.
Right.
Or who can open their legs the widest gets the attention too.
Right. Well, I think also too, studies have been on this. People kind of know that a lot of money has been invested in the study of music and how it affects people. I mean, when you watch a horror movie, there's a reason why the soundtrack is a certain way. When you watch a military movie, there's a reason why the soundtrack is a certain way. And I think a lot of people don't realize, even if you're listening to something passively, not giving it your full attention, it's still affecting you on one level or another. And I think we've talked about this before, but it's not playing music well is not just part of it, but it's also the intent and why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, and that's always been a big part of, since I've known you, I mean, the way that you play and the way that you've advocated for music and music education.
I mean, all of what you just said is absolutely correct. I mean, we're just in a time where, you know, the quality, like people always talk about education. No one really talks about the quality of your education. Yeah. Like, what does that mean? Because you went to an Ivy League school doesn't mean you're smart. I mean, in what sense? Like, how do we judge that? Because you go to a music program doesn't mean you could play.
Right.
No, it's like ball players, basketball players go to, you know, some of them, well, they're forced to actually have to go to 1 year of college or sit out 1 year after high school before they can become a professional or go to the NBA. Yeah. So does it mean they're not good players because they don't, you know, how can I say, they can't play in the NBA after 1 year of you know, or high school, right out of high school? Does it mean that the level of, you know, your musicianship is based on you getting a degree? I mean, I have guys come all the time that have, you know, 4 years, 6 years in institutions, and they can't play Mary Had a Little Lamb. They can't play bebop over it. And what does that say?
Yeah. Says the college is making money, and the director or the president or the chancellor of the college is making money and putting the students into probably student loan debt, knowing they can't make a living for themselves once they graduate. And that's kind of criminal, in my opinion.
Well, I feel like there should be a law, since they want all these laws and everybody's like, you know, on this whole cancel culture mantra. Like, there should be a rule. Universities can't offer courses that there are no jobs in. Like, how in the hell are you going to offer a course? And this is not to slight, you put it in the context of the quote unquote jazz studies or ancestral music studies. It's jazz studies. It's not ancestral music. Ancestral music is what people like me and those that are, you know, they understand the tradition and the framework and the emotional investment in playing the music on a high level. These jazz, quote unquote, jazz studies programs, yeah, it's like a way to make money and it's an ecosystem, but it's not about people playing. It's not about, because like who's the arbiter of that? Not the cast that should be.
Yeah.
I mean, I just noticed the lack of presence of our elders out here on the scene. You pick up publications or, well, now there's no publications now. It's all social media, but you don't see old heads out here. They're not promoted. So it's just like, you know, what do they call it? A S-storm of nonsense out here in the world. And then people don't know. So that's what they have access to. So if you don't see the real, you don't even know what the real is. And if you're already misinformed, once the real is in your face, you think that's not the real.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many sides to this. I mean, talking about like music separately and then the music business as another entity. I mean, we could talk about this and go round and round and round and round and then look at all these different things. I want to, right now for this interview, I want to talk about you and your music and how you got from, you know, from inception till now. So when you were growing up in Detroit, I mean, you obviously were, I'm assuming you played at home with your family. Were there gigs and places where you could go and play and watch other musicians outside of school? I'm assuming there were.
Man, all I did was play gigs. I mean, I can remember playing gigs with my father at like 6, 7 years old. I play gigs. We play all kind of gigs. We play on the street corner in this area of Detroit called Greektown and in Mexican Town. We play nursing home gigs. We play school gigs and educating, you know, young people. We play bar mitzvahs. We play weddings. We play, as I got a little bit older, let's say around 10, 11 years old, I played the clubs all around the Detroit scene. So I've been around the music my entire life and playing all kind of gigs. I had played like through high school, I played maybe 5, 6 different church gigs, like regular. I played in a Catholic church. I played in a congregational church. I played in a Presbyterian church. Played in a sanctified church. I mean, I am a true steward of the higher powers.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. In regular school and the art school that you attended, who were some of your peers? I'm sure there were many that went on to become great musicians. Is that a fair assumption?
Oh, cats I grew up playing in Detroit, yeah. J.D. Allen's one that comes to mind. James Carter is a little bit older than us, but he was on the scene when we were kids. Rodney Whitaker was still somewhat on the scene, like leaving. Like this is high school I'm talking, so we're talking like 90s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Carlos McKinney, fabulous pianist and producer. Now he went into the production world, music production world, and now he's teaching people how to market their music and produce and market their music. Tassili Bond, who passed away a few years back, a great bassist from Detroit. A lot of guys. Turhan Terrell, who's the son of the legendary Earl Van Dyke from Motown. The people know him probably from the film The Funk Brothers documentary. There's quite a few. Dwight Adams, phenomenal trumpeter. And he's still based in the Detroit area. Played with Stevie Wonder for over 30 years. Tons of cats. I'm leaving people out. Kareem Riggins, who grew up with us, and who's a fabulous drummer, and now DJing and produces a lot of music. We spent time, actually, he came out in Seattle when I was living there, and we would hang out. He'd come out there with Ray Brown. So there are a lot of cats that came from the scene. Now, unfortunately, the scene is not what it used to be, but I digress. But
I remember, actually, I saw that band when they came out. It was Kareem Riggins with Ray Brown, and I think it was Jeff Keezer playing piano on that particular tour, if I'm not mistaken. They played here in Tacoma at UPS when Sid Potter was directing the band. Anyways, you mentioned something to me the other day, and I don't know, is it okay to talk about the college story? You talked to me about the position in California.
What about
the position you applied for? Can we talk about that, or is that you'd prefer not to discuss it?
I mean, it's the same thing with like everywhere. I think that the college system is just extremely political, and if you're not from that academy, and you're not political, then it's just different. It doesn't matter about the knowledge or the wisdom or the information that you have. It's more like a box check scenario situation.
Is it okay to like name names, or are we not doing that right now?
I'm not trying to throw anyone in particular under the bus, because it's beyond names sometimes, unless you're going to talk about who the presidents of the schools are, or
Yeah. Fair enough.
The deans and the presidents, and then you really don't know. And then sometimes it's just like you have that level or that layer, and then you have the people that are under that layer, and they have their own politics. Yeah. So you got layers of politics. But if it's talking about somebody's qualifications and their ability to do a job on a high level that can uplift their students and uplift the vibration of a community culturally and artistically, and then what are we talking about if that's the goal?
Yeah. So without naming any names, to give people some context about what we're talking about, you were offered, a very well-known musician reached out to you and said, "Hey, come teach at this prestigious jazz school." You applied. You got all the way to the last round of applications, and then the school said, you're not what we're looking for, because we want someone that looks good on paper," when they could have had one of the best artists of their instrument and educators working for their school, and they decided to opt out because you didn't have a doctorate or whatever they were looking for on paper.
Yeah, but that's almost every school. That's not even. That's
right.
So if you guys are interested to hear more about this, you can check out my YouTube channel, Ali Jackson, on YouTube, and it's is music education a scam?
Yeah, exactly. No, it is very well done. I just watched it. And the reason I wanted to ask you about this is just because of who you are and your profile and what you've done with music and your associations with music. I want the general public to hear that this is what goes on behind closed doors in the educational system. And most people don't know, because I think if they did, they would be furious.
Look, man. You just have people in positions that don't know about the music. That's what it just boils down to.
Yeah. My point is, there's a lot of people that give money to these schools and funding to develop these things, thinking that the money is going to be going to helping out cultural programs and education where it's intended to go. And if they knew how it really went behind the scenes and how these decisions are made, they probably wouldn't give as much money as what they're fleeced for. That's all I'm saying.
I 100% agree. Or what the money is actually earmarked for. I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole. I mean, yeah. I worked at a really big institution, and people would only want to give money towards education.
Yeah,
that's it. They would only, like, if it's not towards education. So the hell with the musicians,
right?
That are Black and of, you know, middle age and whatever. Like, we don't want to help them. We want to help music education. It's like, well, those are the people that actually really need the help,
right?
That are doing it. Like, the actual education is having people on a high level doing it, and people have access to it. I mean, we say this all the time. In my tenure at Jazz and Lincoln Center, you know, the education is you being able to come see this music played on a high level. That's the education.
Yeah.
Like, whether people thought it was like a repertory band or it's like, oh, they're playing old stuff. Yeah, I mean, everything is old at some point. People remake and sample all the music in pop world. All of this stuff is sampled. So you talk about it's old. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
You know, it's like basketball is old. People still play it, and they make billions of dollars every year from guys playing it. It's the same thing.
And selling a lot of merchandise along the way.
Oh, well, I mean, it's major business. But you know, who am I? Who am I to say? I think there's a couple questions that came in. I don't know if you.
Yeah, there's a couple. We'll get to those. We got like 10 minutes left. I'm going to grill you for 10 more minutes, and we'll open up to questions. So I wanted to ask you about this. I mean, I kind of already know the answer, but again, I know that there's other people that are going to be watching these things here, so I want them to benefit from your wisdom. But I remember when I came to work with you for a lesson in particular at the time. This was again like late 90s. I was transcribing. This was some Coltrane with Miles. I think it was off of like Relaxing or one of those, you know, Miles Davis albums. And you said, all right, go ahead and play it. And so I played it. And then you're like, all right, now go ahead and sing it. So then I sang it, right? And then you said, all right, now sing it like 3 times as slow, right? And so I've since learned that. And now I know why. I mean, I know why you did that. But I want you to talk about that, the importance of singing these things and doing them slowly so that people can understand. Because we all know it's important not only to practice, but it's knowing what to practice and it's knowing how to practice. And I think a lot of that information gets lost in jazz education. So I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions about what I was just talking about.
Well, when you're learning something, you need to put it in the lowest common denominator, or like in a form where you can digest it. And learning solos, and I just recently did a speech on this, or a talk on this topic of your ability to just copy and paste is very different than your ability to understand the concept and a philosophy around what someone's doing. So no matter how much you shed it or practice, you're not going to sound like John Coltrane.
Right.
You just not, because that's John Coltrane. And John Coltrane didn't sound like really anyone else. Now, he had elements that sound like other people because those are your influences. But philosophically, it's something that he figured out and that he worked out. And that is the beauty of the music. You can only be you. However, when you don't have a reference and you don't have vocabulary, you have to figure out what is the logic in the concept behind why somebody does what they do, which is beyond the notes. The notes are just, you know, the starting point. Learning the notes is like, okay, I learned the notes, but how are they playing the notes?
Yeah.
And what is the meaning behind the notes? What is the story? And when you learn, in addition to learning a solo, it's how they develop the solo. And I always like, for my younger guys and gals, for them to take a solo and do it phrase by phrase. Learn one phrase. Okay, learn this phrase and then really internalize it, and then go on to the next phrase. And then when you start putting the phrases together, it starts to have more clarity. And we're like, oh, okay. And it has a feeling. So that's it. But I mean, I hope that answered the question about, why I had you do that. Break stuff down, play it really slow. And it's also muscle memory. Certain things that are natural that you don't think about that we do, like how our brains and how our minds are wired. Like, I get on the drums and play a bunch of polyrhythms, but I'm not really thinking about it. I know what the sound should be, and I know what it feels like from my hands. It's kind of similar to this new technology they have where people lose a limb and they can put something on it. It takes like the electric, or what is it? Whatever your nerves fire to create signals, right. And they can interpret that. So, I mean, I find it interesting. It's the same with playing an instrument. Like, what it feels like when you have a good reed, and what it feels like to put a certain amount of air through the horn or focus it a certain way to get a certain sound, because it's in your mind. Like you hear the sound in your mind before you produce it. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think also too, at the time with the singing thing, was just to internalize that, because like you're saying, it comes from here first, and then your instrument, your vocal cords, whatever it is, that's just an extension of what your brain is telling you, right? Same as talking. Like, I'm not thinking about talking right now. I know the words and I'm doing it in real time, and music is kind of like the same way if you've practiced it and assimilated and internalized all those things. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like conversation and it's vocabulary. I'd also like to add that people don't play together enough in an environment where there's pressure. And what I mean by pressure, in a classroom, there's no pressure. If you play a gig with some hostile audience and they want to hear some dance music, that's pressure.
Yeah.
And it's very different. And that's why I feel like a lot of the performances that I see, the bar is very low, or the demand from the audience is low, because they don't even know what it should sound like. So it's just like, yeah, I went to hear some music. It was cool. Like, it should make you feel something.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes we've lost that part of our humanity, or we're losing it. I won't say it's lost completely, but we need to pay attention to that. For young people, they need to go hear a good performance and have a reference of what a good performance is, so then they can model that.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to that time. I still have a billion more questions to ask you. And I know, like, if I ask this next question, this could go on for a minute, but I'm going to go for it anyways, and think we'll do more of these, I'm sure. I want to know, like, some of your teachers when you were getting started on the drums. I know we talked about was Max Roach was a big influence, and Philly Joe Jones, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about, this is a broad thing, but talk about your time with Max, because I know that you've mentioned that lessons they weren't really a lot of playing, but a lot of more conceptual type of things. And I'm wondering if the views and opinions that you have about music now, was that a lot of maybe shared from Max's tutelage, or maybe speak to that a little bit?
Well, I was very fortunate to meet Max Roach at 12. I was 12 years old, and I had the opportunity to play at one of his master classes in Detroit. And the very first lesson he gave me was, it was like, yeah, your playing is cool and all of this. He said, know when to stop. Just from that's my very first lesson, knowing when to stop. But, Max Roach is an architect. He's one of the architects of bebop. And so just his concepts on playing the drum set, I mean, no one did what he did on the instrument before him, like playing fluid, melodic drum solos over forms in a very robust and cohesive way. And so I mean that it was like there's melodies. You could hear the melody in his drum solos, like he was playing a saxophone or piano or a melodic instrument. So he brought that lyricism to the instrument along with, you know, his concepts on independence, uses of paradiddles, how he break up a paradiddle. That's the groove of Un Poco Loco, which he taught me maybe a few years later. I was with him at the IAJE convention. That was in DC in like 1990, I think.
Yep.
There you go. So all of these things, you know, Max Roach is, you know, he's Max Roach. If you don't know who he is, you need to check him out. Check out his music and his breadth of work. It's like huge. It transcends from solo drums to music for activism, social injustice, to boom, to percussion choir, to double quartet, you know, string quartet and ancestral music quartet. I mean, he did a pile of, or made a huge contribution to music in America. So he is definitely on the top of bad, you know what.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, and I told you this the other day. One of the things that you mentioned to me a long time ago during lessons that stuck with me through all these years. I was asking you, I was like, Ollie, I want to work on these lines better, and you said, lines, F a line, play a melody.
That's true. It's true. I think melodies have a lot more weight than just playing lines, and people with all of this velocity in their solos, like lots of notes. I'd rather hear one great note than a pile of lines. I mean, it's cool. I mean, there's space for that. However, it's filler. Like people, like you talk about John Coltrane, people always go like, oh yeah, Train, and people are trying to play like Train, but they miss the most important thing about John Coltrane's playing. And that's his sound.
Yeah.
If he played the lines that everyone is copying the way they played them, he'd be sad. We wouldn't be talking about him.
Yeah. True. Fair enough. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of the questions coming in. I mean, I got a million more questions, and so with your permission, I'd love to do this again sometime. And also, I want to mention too, for people that are enjoying this interview right now, check out Ollie's work that he's doing, all his online content, because there's some great stuff, including the rehearsals. He runs these rehearsals with students, and he's got a lot of interesting things to say that are helpful for anybody wherever you are in your musician journey. So, anyways, getting to the questions here. They're from our buddy Julian McDonough here in Bellingham. The first question is, what are your thoughts on all the Instagram drum shedders? There's a ton of technicians, but not a lot of music, though.
I mean, he sums it up. And Julian is somebody that's been in the music. I met him along with you 20 plus years ago. Yeah, I mean, Greg Hutchinson posted something recently. I saw it's in my latest education.
I saw it. It's good. We'll talk about that too.
I mean, it's just like there's no vocabulary, and people like just reinvent a new thing that's not even a new thing because you have so many people that are just ignorant. Like YouTube and social media is very interesting now because all of these young people have access to it, but there's no filter. So if something becomes popular, then it becomes like a narrative and a voice that's not vetted. It's like me starting a medicine show, like being a doctor, and I start just giving diagnosis on what I think is wrong with people when I don't have, like, that's what it's like.
Yeah,
that's what it's like. Or me giving advice on soccer, you know, or you know, I could do that better because I actually have studied this sport a little bit. Not that I can play not that I'm great or anything, but the point of it is anyone can talk about anything and there's no consequence.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the former president of the United States.
Sure. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, like you said, it's just your opinion, but it's your opinion based on 30 years of doing all this work with all these great minds and knowing the history. And so, yeah, it's just an opinion, but there is all the weight of the other stuff behind it.
I try not even to present opinions. I'm just the conduit. And these are facts. Like, this is research. Like, I lived it, so I saw it. So, I mean, and I see it out here now. I mean, I go to jam sessions out here now. yeah, guys are playing flurries when they should probably be while they're drinking a flurry or McFlurry.
McFlurry.
Yeah, it's to be consumed, not played.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, there's a great drummer, Greg Hutchinson, who has an Instagram account where he does a lot of great work as well. And just look up Greg Hutchinson and flurries, and you'll see what we're talking about right now. So, anyways, Julian had another question for you here. He wants to know, do you have any plans of running your own private student bands without dealing with colleges?
Yeah, I think that's the way to go now. And, you know, with what you're doing here and having people on talking about the important message in the music and learning the music and how to learn the music, I just think college programs are false. Like, they're just not consistent. Let's put it this way. I'm not going to say all of the programs are bad. I'm not here to bash them. But if you're really talking about playing, I feel like musicians have to be empowered to start their own venues and to present music of a certain quality, because I just don't see it out here. And waiting around, it's just not going to pop up. If it's not happening now, it's not going to happen unless the musicians are activated to do it. So to answer that question, yes, I look forward to doing it or partnering with people that are already doing it. They have the ball rolling. So I'm completely open to that. I'm open to all aspects of getting the real techniques into the young people to keep this great art form on a high level and to take it into the future.
Yeah. Wonderful. I think Julian's got, I think this is part of the other question. Just, do you have any plans? But that was, I see what he's saying. So, all right. Well, we still got about 10 minutes. So I have some other questions for you. Tons of questions for you. Can you talk a little bit about, Max Roach and Philly Joe Jones are totally different people, different styles, all that. Can you talk about your time with Philly Joe Jones a little bit?
I mean, my time with him was basically because he knew my pops and he came to town and to hang out with my pops, I think for a gig or something. I was really young, but I didn't know who he was. He was just one of my pops' friends. But what he shared and what he was about was the spirit and the essence of the music. Extremely intelligent. I remember that. Maybe I was like 7 or 8 years old. And the attitude towards playing and the regal aspect of playing. And so I think this is what's missed. Like his style was obviously unique to him, and all great musicians in general, they all sound individual, even though they fit into this framework of a language and a vocabulary. It's like how we all talk. We all speak different pace, different timbre of voice, different cadence, different accents. It's like, so all of that's relevant. However, we can communicate our ideas. Like, how well can we communicate our ideas? So I think Philly Joe Jones is somebody that represents that. And even in my brief encounter with him as a boy, he put something on me as far as like, if you could be super hip and super soulful at the same time. And what I mean by that is you don't have to be like a show off to be cool, and you can also be very humble. So that's just one of my or what I've taken away from just that experience as a boy, seeing someone that great and then not knowing who they are. And I think that's sometimes the best thing. It's because someone has a name or they developed a name and reputation, they're still a human. And sometimes people get idolized or they get put on this pedestal, and I'm not always about that. That's where I think we fall short as a society, when you put people on a pedestal for accolades, but you don't know them as a person. And for musicians and conflating the two, It's like, oh, well, this guy is this way, and then he's that way. It's like we all human.
Yeah, true. I remember same sentiment, but one of my professors in college, a well-known musician, Hadley Allman, he was talking about meeting all these musicians. He's like, oh, I realized, yeah, they put on their pants legs one leg at a time like everybody else. I mean, yeah, we look at them as these masters and things, but they're still, at the end of the day, human beings like the rest of us, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and I try to live that and get better. Like, you can always be better. There's always something new to learn. There's always something that we can improve. And I'm a proponent of that. I would definitely say that. I'm always trying to improve.
Yeah. How old do you know, Ali?
45.
45. I'm right behind you. I'll be 44 this year. And I've taught a lot, I've played a lot, and I know a lot, but I also know that I don't know a lot. And every time I get the chance to hang around musicians like yourself or someone like George Colligan, it's a super humbling experience. And you know, people look to me for answers because I'm in a position where I teach and I have students and I play, and I know that I can give some direction, but there's a lot that I just don't know. So for people that are watching this interview and don't really know where to start. And what I guess what I should say is, like, when I started learning about music, other than hanging out with musicians in my community that were better and trying to play with them and read books, you know, I'd read album covers or liner notes on CDs. Now, with a lot of the students, and let's just face it, a lot of people are apathetic or lazy. They don't want to take the time to look stuff up. They just go to Spotify. So my question is, what advice would you give to people that want to learn more about going back to the roots and more about the history of this music? Where would you direct them, aside from listening to performances as much as they can from great artists? Where can they go? I mean, we have the internet. Where would you say you need to go check this out? Go just check this out. What would you recommend to people that want to learn more about this music?
Whew.
Yeah, do that in 10 minutes.
I mean, entry points. I feel this way now because most young people interact through social media. There's a lack of presence with cats that are with the music and are talking about it like this, or having conversations about, okay, what was your experience playing the music or not playing, and a brand of playing that requires a certain level or a certain baseline. And I just think because we don't have the elders, I mean, we do have elders. I mean, we're more on the going towards the elder side now to share that perspective. It's just a perspective that's harder to find. So what I would say is you have to find old heads, and maybe I should just post a list of cats that are living, that are around. They're like Jedi Knights that have been taken over by the Empire, and they're hiding all throughout the universe.
I've actually had that exact same thought running through my head a lot. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of like that, and you got to find them where they are. What's unfortunate is a lot of times, you know, I do this thing, and I have a problem with this communicating with the young people, of people just saying, hey, I'm coming or I'm not coming. And I don't know what it is. It's like cultural. I just think maybe just this younger generation is so sensitive and entitled, and entitlement means you actually don't know that you're entitled.
Yeah.
It's like people with white privilege.
Sure.
White privilege is around, they don't even know, you don't even know your privilege. So you can't even know. It's like, oh, you mean you get harassed by the police because you're Melanite? Oh, you know, you could get snatched out of your car and beat up. Like, that's been going on for 400 years. Yeah. So if you're not aware of it, you can't know. It's like, oh, this person has a wealth of information that they're willing to share with you, and all you have to do is show up. Oh, that sounds too difficult. I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Fair enough. It looks like there's another question from Julian here. It says, the statement you made about Philly being a friend of your dad's and not knowing who he was as a young kid, being around people like that, what was it like to get out in the real world and realize he grew up around that level of greatness? Was it disillusioning? Sorry.
I don't know if I understand the question completely. Was it disillusioning to not know who Philly Joe Jones was as a kid, or to be around people like that and not know who they are in general?
I think that's kind of what he's getting at. Maybe he can clarify here, but I think that's the gist. Yeah.
I mean, first off, I just grew up in a time where anybody that was older, I just had respect for them. He wasn't a thing of, if they were 5 years older, you had a different level of respect for them, just them being your senior. So older cats that you didn't know about or didn't know, that wasn't a real big case, only because I was 7, 8 years old. So I didn't have the internet. I wouldn't have known who he was or what his level of greatness was. Yeah. And then sometimes that's how it is. You're around somebody who is absolutely phenomenal, and you could not know who they are. So that's always a good practice for young people. If anyone gets anything out of this, is always be respectful and be humble, because you never know who might be next to you. Just be nice or pretend. That's what
I completely. I'm looking at my screen here. There's a bunch of other questions on this other screen. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. I'll get to them right now. So the first one here is ask you about your time in France, and would you consider a tour back to the Pacific Northwest? I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you speak to this.
Well, France is interesting. I mean, I learned a lot about the culture. I actually composed a piece in 2018 around the colonized territories or colonized land or countries of France. So, so the piece, Algeria, Morocco, Réunion, Côte d'Ivoire, and Cameroon. It was a 5-movement piece, and I had all French musicians or people who have a connection to France. One brother is from Réunion, his family. But I say that is because, we look at America, and we're here, and we have our dysfunction and all of our problems. But when you live in another nation, in a country, and when you start living there, you start to see through a different lens and being an outsider. And it's more clear for you being an outsider than it is if you were from there. That's why America, people that are not from the United States, they come here and they can easily see what the problems are. And we're here and we're just so deep in them, we can't see them. So my time in France was illuminating, and it was a great respite and a great moment for me. And maybe I do go back. I don't really know. I don't know what the cards hold now, but no, it was great. And some really talented and hungry young musicians, but different culture. Culture.
Yeah. Well, from you, I contacted you when we were going to be out there for to perform in Nice and be at France, and you said get in touch with Karsten. And when I met him right away and heard him play, I was like, yeah, well, Ali. I mean, you knew right away like how to find these guys. You're kind of like a musician magnet. The people just kind of gravitate towards you. People that play, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna play, it's like people want the benefit of like having a great trainer. It's like you work out and you got this trainer, but he's kind of a hard bottom. But I'm not really like that. I mean, I'm like that about music or the seriousness of music. But everyone has an entry level and everyone has different goals. So It all depends on what your goals are. That's the number one thing that I would say to students, people trying to learn the music. What is your goal? Like, what is your end goal? I always like that. Like, so what do you want to be? And then you go backwards from that. And do you attain or have you obtained those fundamental things that are going to take you to being what you say you want to be?
Yeah.
You have to do it reverse. You can't just be like, I'm just floating around. I mean, you can do it. You can do it any way you want. But the more clarity you have, the better results.
Yeah. Well, what I would say, I mean, I've been very fortunate to be around a lot of great musicians here in the Northwest and people that have moved here. But in my time studying with you, what I've appreciated about the things you've had to say is the honesty about it. There's no BSing. And I remember vividly back in the day, you said, the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast is out here on the West Coast, people seem to kind of, stroke your ego. Oh yeah, you're doing okay. Even if you're doing a mediocre work, people kind of stroke their ego, where you said on the East Coast, the way you were raised, if you weren't making it, people would tell you right away, it was BS. This is how to fix it. Go fix it. And it was not out of being mean, but it was out of respect for the music and to help people get better so that they can make a living.
Well, let me correct that. They wouldn't tell you how to fix it. They were like, you're not doing it. You have to figure out how to fix it. No one was giving you the answers. They'd just be like, you're sad. Go home. Next. Like, they just wouldn't have time. And so now, not just stroke your ego, but this is all over the place. I say it in my, the latest, is Music Education a Scam on my YouTube channel. They're a customer. They're not actually, we want to make you feel good. Like you're improving, even if you're not improving, we want to make you feel good so we can keep those tuition checks rolling. And that is just what it is. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, you tell me. I don't know. And so starting another or starting more grassroots programs is what's happening, and venues. No more schools need to be built. They need to start cutting these music programs and building venues and letting the old heads curate the venues. That's the solution. So I get tired of people like, oh, well, you're complaining, and I was like, nah, a certain level of complaining is good because you have to identify a problem. Like, so if you can't, if it doesn't trigger something with you, then you don't care about it. The next thing is a solution. So what is the solution? Build venues and have old heads run them. That's it. That's the solution.
Fair enough. All right. Some more questions here. See if I can get to everybody. What's the next one? Oh, the question is, forgive my ignorance, but what did you both mean by lines as opposed to melody? Do you want to take this, or?
Yeah, lines are, scales, etudes, connective material. It's not necessarily a melody. So if I was like, that's kind of line. That's more of a melody. But all the other stuff is filler or connector material that takes you to that little melody. Shoo-doo-boo, loo-bee, shoo-bee, doo-bee, doo-bee, doo-dee, doo-da, shoo-dee, doo-dee, doo-dee, doo-da, shoo-doo-boo-dee, doo-dee, doo-dee, doo-dee-da. So same kind of shape, but I filled it in with notes at the end. But there's doo-dee, 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 doo-da. That's a melody.
Yeah.
Singable. Accessible.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let me see. It looks like we've got through all the questions. Good. We're a little bit over time. I apologize, but thank you for all this. Question I like to ask all of our guests here is, if you were, if someone, a musician or prospective musician, someone learning how to play was coming to you and say, Ollie, or what advice would you give someone in that position that has been helpful to you to get where you are today as a musician? And they were asking, like, what should I do? What would be some advice that you impart to them to help them improve and grow?
Man.
Yeah, I know.
In today's day, I'd have no problem answering it 20 years ago. Today, honestly, what I say is keep your love and passion for the music. Check out high quality things all the time. Just like what you said earlier about is what you ingest. It's like food. If you eat garbage every day, if you eat fast food every day, all of the fast food places, if you eat that stuff every day, over time, it's going to mess your insides up. It's the same with music. You listen to nonsense and bumpity bump, and it's going in your head every day, all day long, and it's not feeding you. It has a long-term effect. It's a known fact that, CIA or operatives, they use loud music to disorient, or it's like a form of torture. They torture people with playing loud music, like the most ignorant hip hop stuff, you know, because it's disorienting. But if you listen to stuff that has poetry in it, and nuance and subtlety and taste and crafted with care, then that's, you know, higher quality, and it promotes a different level of vibration spiritually. So don't lose that. Next thing is you have to do something that generates some kind of income because the music, you know, playing it, performing as a performing artist is just not sustainable. And when I see all of these kids going to these programs and then they go back into another program to get another degree to just be in the academy system to then just teach with no experience of playing at all. It's just so how are you going to educate somebody on how to play when you haven't done it yourself?
Right.
And it's practice based. It's like doctors practice medicine. It's like musicians practice every day to be on a bandstand. It's like you must be in practice. However, some kind of way, like in education, it's like, oh, I wrote a paper on this. It's like, well, writing a paper is not the same as writing an arrangement.
Yeah.
And the quality of that arrangement, or the quality of the stuff that you're doing. So to answer the question for a young person, like in summary, because I know it's long and kind of convoluted.
No, it's good. It's all good.
You have to be diehard about playing, and you have to know that I'm going to be broke, basically. And then hopefully you'll play with great musicians, but they're evaporating. It's like the way the scene is. I talked to some older musicians just the other day, great bassists. And he's just like, is music even relevant in our society today? Like, that's the thing where he's coming from. Does it even matter? Does music even matter? And because we are all on videos or whatever, people will be more interested in what I'm talking about. That's why I do videos. I could play all kind of stuff on my instrument or write tunes and arrangements and all of that. Who cares? No one's ready to listen and to be able to invest in it. That's the thing. To appreciate music, it requires investment. It's just not a backdrop for a video with somebody in a bikini on a stripping pole. It's just, if we doing that, then, and I'm not the first person to talk about this.
Sure.
Maybe I'm more vocal in my generation of talking about it because I come from the hip hop generation. I check out hip hop, but by no means am I like, oh, let me strive to do that and put down my sticks and put down my pen and start doing beats. And I've done beats or whatever, but it's just like a fleeting thing.
Sure.
It's like, asking an Olympian to be like, okay, now,
thumb wrestle.
You want to do this aerobics class for seniors? I mean, yeah, you could. I was like, but it's like a waste of their ability.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to your Star Wars analogy, it's time for some Return of the Jedi. I think, it's starting to come. It'll come around with this type of stuff and getting these conversations rolling. So that, because a lot of times back in the day, like you look at the period of like Young Lions, the 90s and all that, people weren't talking about this kind of stuff. And I don't think anyone could have foreseen music and the music business going the way that it's gone. But I think having these kind of conversations will help hopefully get things going the other direction. Hopefully.
Well, yeah. When you say business and music don't mix. They're two different things.
Yeah.
And it was popular. Wynton Marsalis came out here in, let's say, the 80s and kind of re-energized it. And he's super talented and it's merit-based. I mean, part of it is that he was novelty because he played great classical trumpet. And his passion was playing the ancestral music. And so it was marketable. And then it caught on. And he had a lot of integrity. See, that's the thing. No one stands for anything. People will sell out for the bag and instantly. They'll throw you under the bus for the bag. So if you don't have integrity for nothing, then it doesn't mean anything. And that's what we see out here.
Yeah.
There's no benefit in being serious.
There's Yeah, we can talk about this on and on and on, and I don't want to take too much time. There's one more question. It's, did you both play together? And if yes, what did you appreciate most of Ollie's playing, Kareem? Thanks a lot for your great music conversation. The first time I met Ollie, you know, I was completely ignorant. I didn't know who Ollie was. And his wife at the time, her family owned a barbecue place in Gig Harbor, and it was a grand opening. And his ex-wife, wife at the time, sorry, Ollie, called me and said, "Hey, can you come play for the grand opening?" I said, "Sure." And over the course of the conversation, she said, "Oh, by the way, my husband's a drummer." And I said, "Well, what's his name?" She said, "Ollie Jackson." And I was like, "Who's that?" I didn't know. I mean, I knew all the local players, but I didn't know Ollie. Like I said, young and dumb. And anyways, so played the gig, got to know of Ollie's reputation. I'm like, holy crap. And so when Ollie came to town, I bugged him incessantly to get lessons. And I said, "Ollie, you know, would you mind playing a gig?" And so he did. He played at a club with me here in Tacoma, and I advertised Ollie Jackson on drums. The club was packed, and I did not know Ollie's playing at all. And so he shows up to the club, and he knows this story. We talked about it a bunch. He shows up to the club with a ride cymbal, a hi-hat, and a snare. And I'm like, "Ollie, I'm worried, right? Because the club is packed." I'm like, "Ollie, where's your drums?" He's like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." And Ollie played so much drums that night. It was ridiculous. And it showed me not only his command of sound and what he was able to do, but just musicality in general. And the depth of his playing was, I'd never seen anything like that. And I'd been around a lot of the older musicians, older drummers, guys that played the Basie band or around those caliber of musicians. But never a really like young musician who'd played around with a lot of the modern players. And Ollie blew my mind. And I'm like, I want to learn. How do I do? What do I do? What was that? You know? And Ollie was very, very, very patient and helpful, and still is, because I still have a long way to go as a musician. So that was the impact that he had on me. But it wasn't just me. It was everybody on the scene would try to go to the sessions that Ollie had at his house and ask questions and play. So I hope I answered that question sufficiently. But Ollie, I mean, like, you know, my feelings, and a lot of the musicians that you had contact with here, we're very, very grateful and fortunate to have had the time with you here in the Northwest that we did. So,
man, I'm grateful for you, and thank you for the kind words. I mean, I just look at it as I'm always trying to improve and get better. And sometimes competition, like healthy competition, I feel like that's not even out here now. And it doesn't mean like, oh, I can play more notes than you, or I can play faster than you. No, it's like being poetic. I mean, I remember working with Sweet Edison, and he would always say that, you know, when he got in a Basie band, they wanted you to sound like you. If you tried to sound like someone else, they would just get that person. I was like, we don't need you. We'll just get the cat that you trying to sound like. So you had to have something original. And I feel like now in our society, in our culture, people aren't original. They don't know how to be original. It's like copy paste culture. So I'm always a proponent of learning history and learning. And I was like, look, man, you're not going to learn. You're not going to do the investment. Like, I was inspired by people like Marcus Roberts and Wynton, who were like, you need to learn the whole tradition of your instrument. Like, that's the standard that I have for myself. I've studied like all of these people and not listening to the records. There's a difference between listening to a record and studying a record. Two different things. Because I see young cats now, I was like, yeah, I know that record. Yeah, knowing the record means, okay, you've heard of it. Being, you know, masterful or learning it, like transcribing it, sitting on one tune to really understand the concept and the philosophy behind what they're playing and why they're playing what they're playing. That's studying. So I was just fortunate to be in that environment and it be, you know, very hardcore, like, you know, boot camp, Eric Lewis would say. Like, Wynton was his drill instructor. I mean, and to a certain degree, it could be like that. And if so, you know, it's not for everyone. It's like people in professional athletics. Man, coaches aren't being nice to you. They're not giving out warm fuzzies at practice. I just guarantee you that. They're not. Hey, John, are you feeling okay? You know, how was that collision, that pancake? Oh, you need a rest? You want to sit down? I was like, nah, they just call the next dude. It's like gladiator type of stuff. But musically, it should be that way, with precision and taste. not necessarily with brawn and, fireworks. I think now it's just, however cute you can be is just for how far you'll go along. You'll get along with the go along, or go along with the get along game.
Yeah. Well, until you can stop being marketable, then they'll find somebody else to sell stuff for them.
Yeah, because then it's not about music, and that's what's lost here. Like the big elephant in the room is the music and the quality of the music, and the people that just goes out of the window. It's about all of the packaging and all of this other stuff.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I mean, you had one more question. I have one more question for you because you reminded me of this, and I know that there's going to be drummers watching this, and I want you to speak to this. You talked about this. Had you do a workshop at Ted Brown Music when you did the last tour out this way, and you spoke about you wanted to be known as the quietest drummer alive or ever that's ever played. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
I mean, that's just me probably being silly. Yeah, I just feel like the drums are not played with the same level of detail and care that they could be. And I go back through history and time, like one of my huge, influences and someone I respect or someone who I look to model their concept or use it is Connick, drummer with the Modern Jazz Quartet. And he played at a dynamic level that was very, I guess you could call it piano-esque, but it still maintained a certain level of intensity. Same with Vernel Fournier. They played with a bite and edge without a whole lot of volume. And this is the thing that I always try to employ. And it doesn't mean I don't play loud or I can't be thunderous. It's just it actually has more weight. When the drums govern the sound of a band. So if you really play piano, you force everyone else to play piano. The drums are choosers like that means saxophonists, horn players, they all have to come down. And at the same time, you liberate the bass. The bass player can be heard. And so that voice is present. So those are all of the things you can do, or you have power without playing loud. Like that's the power of being able to do that in the ensemble. So that's something that I always talk about. I've always been a proponent of, and I still work on it today. I actually I just finished a course on grooves, Ali's Universe of Grooves. And it's going to come out sometime this year, probably August or September. So you can look out for that. It'll be in conjunction with Jazz Memes. So people will check that out. But anyway, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ali. I know there's more to come because, like I said, I've only got through a fraction of my questions here, but and there is talk of bringing you out this way to Northwest. When we can figure something out, we'd love to have you come out here and do some performing and presenting and all that kind of stuff with your willingness. So what's next? People can look forward to expecting from the online content or performances. Anything coming up? Or you had a new album. The Yes Trio just did a semi-new album. When did that come out? The latest.
2019 it came out, and it won the Disillusioning Grand Prix Disillusioning. So it won the album of the year in France.
And what about there's Big Brown Get Down Volume 2? When did that get released? I know that was recorded a while ago, but that came out not that long ago.
This year. It came out this year, and you can get that only at alidrums.com. That's my commercial.
Smart move.
Only for purchase only at alidrums.com, which is another night of a historic run at the Old Fat Cat in New York City with legendary bassist Bob Hurst, obviously legendary Wynton Marsalis, and young, soon to be legendary Aaron Goldberg. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that's actually embodies that run of gigs actually embodies what the music is about, because there was no rehearsal. It was just playing and more listening than playing. And I think I wrote that in the notes for that album, because we were in tune to and have respect for everyone's playing. So everyone was super hyper listening, like the antennas were on high. And it was fun. Like that's what playing should be. It should be fun. And you could feel that. You could feel that with the audience there, or the people that were present.
Right on. Well, Ollie, thank you so much. To all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. If you are familiar with Ollie's work, or if you're not, I highly encourage you to check it out and check out the online content that he's making now. It's wonderful. If you've been enjoying these interviews and the concerts and the new music that we're writing every single week, and you want to help support our work, you can make a donation either via PayPal or Venmo, or mailing a check, or any of that kind of stuff. And that information is at the beginning of this video here. And like I said, Ollie, there's so much more stuff that I want to ask you about. So hopefully we can do some more of these. But I really appreciate your time, as I'm sure all of our viewers do. And thank you so much for being with us today. Man,
thank you for doing what you're doing, man. I'm a huge supporter and proponent of what y'all are doing. You, Julian, and all of the other cats around the scene. So, man, continue the beautiful work and bringing people closer to a real balanced and soulful humanity.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot to me coming from you. And so we'll log off here, leave it at that, and talk to you soon, I hope.
Yes, we'll talk soon for sure.
All right, take care.
All right, now, you too. Thank y'all.